All right, so I wanted to talk to you. Okay, so we are getting into chapter 12, um, and a really good chapter. I'm very excited about your discussion board posting today, or this week, because it really, I give you some real life examples of some crime mapping softwares. Not great crime mapping softwares, but what I like about this crime mapping is that it gives you multiple agencies and allows you to look at different agencies all at one site. You can kind of see in my opinion, some of the ineffectiveness of that crime mapping and how they're not really using it effectively. These agencies are paying about $2,000 a piece to use this software, and they're just not using it very well. And there's some reasons for that. One is a lot of these agencies are universities. You'll actually see my university name on there. We opted out of that um, because we don't want people hopping on there and looking at this crime mapping and not understanding the data that we're putting out. And we also didn't want automated crime mapping posting because we were concerned about privacy issues. So we use an alternative way of posting. We do a manual posting where it's automatically put in there, but the dispatcher actually has to hit a button and it will populate. So you can take a look at that and see what you think the differences are and what you like and what you don't like. Um, so as far as this week, we talk about problem-oriented policing and community-oriented policing. So these are very different, you know. And I think I might have talked to you in the past a little bit about this for a minute, but I want to talk to you again about it. So these are two different styles of policing. Community-oriented policing, we are not attempting to reduce crime levels when we're doing community-oriented policing. Our community-oriented policing does not reduce crime levels. What it does is it increases public trust, okay? So if you're in an area where you have an issue with trusting police officers, but you don't have a high crime issue, then that's what you want to do. You want to do the community-oriented policing because you need to increase trust. But if you're in an area where you're having some major crime issues, then the problem-oriented policing works. It's effective. We've seen it reduce. I mean, listen, when CompStat came out in New York City, so CompStat was a big crime mapping program. And when that came out in New York City, they were able to reduce crime by 50%. Now, there's a lot of arguments nowadays about CompStat, you know. So initially, it was the coolest thing, and the chief was amazing, and everybody was saying his praises. And all of a sudden, some captains started coming in and saying, no, he wasn't reducing any crime. We were just lying about our reports. We changed things. So let's say, because what would happen is the chief would come in, he would have a meeting with all his precinct captains, and he would say, precinct number 5, you have what they call a hot spot, or when you're looking at that precinct, you know, the number of crimes generate a color in that region. And if there's a hot spot, a red spot, where there's a whole bunch of a specific crime, let's say it's carjacking, armed carjacking, then the chief says you need to reduce that number of carjacking. And the next meeting, when you come in and you still have that hot spot and you haven't done anything to reduce it, he's going to say, fix it next week. And then they come back in and they still haven't done anything to reduce it. He fires that precinct captain. And so the precinct captains say that what they did was they just started to change how they classified things. So yeah, we have a rash of the hijacking or carjacking. So now what we're going to do is we're not going to classify that as carjacking anymore. We're going to classify it as an automobile theft, you know, and balance it out that way. And so that's what the precinct captains said. You know, but also a lot of those precinct captains were a little disgruntled because they got fired. So it kind of goes 6 of one, half does the other. You know, whatever you want to believe. But there is some value. There's some true value. There has to be true value in it. We've seen a reduction. You can't fake 50%. Additionally, it just makes sense that you identify problem areas and you find ways to fix those problem areas, and that makes sense. So in a state that has this these crime issues, the alternative to community policing is problem-oriented policing. So now, who's using crime analysis? Well, we've seen a big increase. You know, a lot of agencies are using it. And in fact, when you become an accredited agency, so when you go through a CLIA accreditation, and you see a lot of agencies do that, they have to have some form of crime mapping. It may not be a crime mapping that's publicized to everybody. There has to be some form of crime mapping that your agency does. So when you go in the office somewhere, there's going to be a map with some pegs on it or something that does crime mapping. A lot of people do it electronically now. That obviously makes sense. But in 2000, only 15% of agencies has crime mapping. You say, well, then why do I even need to learn about it as a police officer? You know, I'm going through this course. Why am I learning about crime mapping? Only 15% of agencies have it. Well, those 15% are large agencies. So even though it's only 15% of agencies, 59% of police officers use crime mapping nationally because there's only 15% of agencies, but those 15% are very large agencies. So the majority of police officers, you have a 50-50 chance of working for an agency if you're a police officer that uses crime mapping, because over 59% of law enforcement officers in the nation work in an agency that uses crime mapping. The first benefit to crime analysis that crime analysis provides is the ability to show the relationship between crime and casual factors. And that is truly our first benefit to it. Is we want to look at, is this just a casual factor, something that's just kind of happening? There's really no system. There's really no reason to it, and it's just a coincidence, or is this really truly a crime factor? You know, something that we need to focus on and pursue. Another interesting thing that this chapter talks about is situational crime prevention, and the relationship between situational crime prevention and the rational choice theory, and that's a very interesting theory that to me makes a lot of sense. So with situational crime prevention, you have to have two components. You have to have the opportunity, and then you have to have the rational choice theory in effect. So the opportunity is, I'm walking by an electronics store that has a big window, and inside that electronics store I see an item I want. There's no one else around, and I notice that the store owner didn't activate the security alarm. I can see it, and it's flashing green instead of red or something. So there's the opportunity for me to steal from that store. Now we couple that with rational choice theory, and what rational choice theory basically is when you say, okay, I get that I want that item, but am I willing to risk the punishment of going to jail for that item? And this is when we see really, it's a very interesting theory, especially if you are a follower of Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman's theory, which talks about children and the use of video games. And the theory basically says this is why we see a drop in criminal activity with people who are 22 and under, or 22 and over, because up until you get to that like 20, early 20 age, your brain is still developing, and you're still developing this ability to make rational choices. And so you have that factor going on. But once you hit 22, you're able to kind of make those rational choices better. You're not making impulse choices. And so if you're a follower of Dave Grossman will show you a slide by a study conducted by Indiana University where they have brainwave activity. And so a normal 15-year-old has a decent amount of activity in the frontal lobe, or the part of the brain that has reason and cognitive thought and just that reasoning ability. And not a lot of activity in the animal instinct ability. However, when they engage in violent video games or watch violent shows, that reasoning part of the brain in these brainwave studies actually shuts down. They don't have any or very low activity in that area. And that part of the brain where the animal instinct is operating is just on fire. You know, it's very active. And it takes almost 72 hours of having no exposure to violent video games or violent media for those two systems to balance out. And so that's an interesting correlation to this rational choice theory, because you're standing there, now you have the opportunity, and now you have to use your rational thought to do the risk reward thing. And if your part of the brain is not developed yet enough, or if you've been exposed to these violent video games, that reasoning is just way, way, way down here, and your instinct is up, and you're more prone to do it. Now that doesn't make it right. There's not an excuse for it, but it's an interesting philosophy to think about and to talk about. So rational choice theory is the second component to the situational crime prevention. It's something to be to think about and to know about. Okay, you cannot conduct a modern crime analysis now without mapping capabilities, and really it's hard to do mapping capabilities without a good software and those kinds of things. If you say that you're giving a crime analysis and you don't include the mapping component, then you're not really doing a true crime analysis. You have to have that mapping component because you're able to see so many things. You're able to see trends from that. And you're not just looking for a citywide trend of burglaries. You're looking for a hotspot zone of burglaries and a rhythm and a pattern, because people operate in rhythm and patterns. You know, we talk about a lot in criminology about the triangle. And so a lot of times when we have like a serial killer, we'll find that the body is dumped within that triangle. So this point of the triangle is where the person works. This point of the triangle is where the person lives, and this point of the triangle is where the person has recreation, maybe where they work out, maybe where they enjoy going, you know, whatever, the recreation. And so normally we find the body of that person within that triangle. Now maybe the triangle is like this, but we still find it within those triangle lines because that is what the person is familiar with. So crime mapping is so important. You really do have to have it. I think that's about it. All that I have for you this week. I really just want to talk to you about that. I think it's very important, especially as you get into the law enforcement factor, law enforcement career, to understand that rational choice theory and kind of some of the reasons that people are doing those things. Also important to understand the importance of crime mapping and how just truly important that is to you as a law enforcement officer. You really can identify crime spots and make an impact on reducing crime. Maybe you don't have that community policing factor, and society and the community won't think, oh look, this is a great police officer, but in your heart you'll know that you're reducing crime and you're making an effect on that. So that's an important piece for us. So with that said, hey, I appreciate it. You all have a good day and enjoy your week.